In 1967, I decided to celebrate our nation's centennial by going to Ireland for 4 months. And while I was in Ireland, I decided to celebrate the lovely country of Ireland by going to Europe for a month or so. And while I was there, once again, I saw things this time like altarpieces, like reliquaries, things that had things inside. And when I got back home, I think I'd been working on a little box, and I took a saber saw and cut a door in it, and then put hinges on. And the hinges were so crude, I put them on the outside. I didn't sink them into the door; it was on the outside. But I think it had 4 doors, and it was only a little tiny one. And it was, I don't remember exactly what it was called. It might have been called sea-like, because it had paintings that were vaguely sea-ish on the outside. And when they opened up, I made some rocks inside. Now, I was getting a little better making things because I had been making various things, but I'd never done it in a box. And the box were like rocks, like sea rocks. In fact, the boxes were Kleenex. But made them. I had asked somebody at the National Gallery, because a lot of the early stuff was paper mache. And I asked them about that, and they said, well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with paper mache if you drop a few mothballs in. But they said a better thing would be if you used white glue and rags. So I used chicken wire with white glue and rags, and then eventually I used other things on top, polyfilla or modeling paste or that sort of thing. And I found that with my limited notion of carving and everything else, but I could do practically anything. It couldn't have wings on it because polyfilla wouldn't work with the wings. And so I became known as the master of the polyfilla boxes. And once I got into the box, I found a rather interesting thing. I didn't think of this in the beginning, but it's a natural thing. Supposing you have a door that's a fancy one like this, and when you open it, the negative space is exactly the same as the positive. So if they look good that way, they'll probably look good open because one will echo the other. But I found out some other things that I had no idea before I did it, and that was that I now had an art object that could double or even quadruple its space. If it had wings, it could reach way out, or it could be all contained. It could change its color if the inside was different than the outside. It could change its texture if the inside was different than the outside. And it could do a whole lot of things that a painting couldn't do, yet it was essentially a painted object. And it could also reference all these things that I loved, like reliquaries and altarpieces and that sort of thing. So, and you could do different things. I did one that had the first door hinged to the second door, which is hinged to the third door, which is hinged to the fourth door, which is then hinged to the body. And you can imagine, you could turn it inside out. And by that time, I was experimenting to find out, how many things you could do. Sometimes, if you cut a door in another door but hinge it a different way, it's easier shown than we can look at one, and it's easier shown than. But there were all kinds of things that you could do with the doors. And the other thing I found out very shortly is that they should not be one-trick ponies, and by that I mean. If you have a jack-in-the-box or something hidden and you keep the box closed, a person can open it and say, oh, it's got something in it. And that's it. That's the one trick. So I didn't want that. I wanted them to be left in some interesting position as opposed to closed. The very first show I had of the boxes, I came in the next morning, and this was at the Isaacs Gallery. I came in the next morning and they were all closed. And I said to Av, why'd you close them up? He said, I didn't close them. People open them up, look at them, close them up. You leave your doors closed. You don't leave your house with doors open. It's just a natural thing. And there was a lot of stuff that I thought was, to me, was quite natural, that people would like to see different positions, and people would open them and then close them again. the real idea of the box format was to prolong the viewing time so that you couldn't take it in. You couldn't say, yes, I've seen that. And strangely enough, the art world just at that moment was going towards what a critic, a friend of mine, called glimpse art. You say, oh, yep, there's that, there's that, there's that. And they're all 10 feet by 10 feet, but you could take, what you see is what you get. And it was very quick. And I had always said that if a thing wanted to make you come back to it, this was one of the things that made it resonate. So I was going exactly the wrong way. And originally they were designed with individual people in mind, and I feel there are a few individual people that have them, but mostly they're galleries, and unfortunately when they're in the gallery they have the do not touch syndrome. And years ago, and the very first, probably the first public showing of boxes with the Heart of London, and it was an exhibition with a bunch of London artists in, and it was in the National Gallery, and I wanted to see if the hinges needed oiling, so I walked up, opened them, and unfortunately they did, and they went, and the guard came scuttling over and told me to, you know, I would get thrown out if and I didn't want to say, well, I'm the artiste, because he was just doing his job. But later in the day, when I had business to do, probably Carfax business, with Jean Sutherland Boggs, the director, and I told her about this, and she invented the sign that I've used ever since. It says, please handle gently, which lets you know to be careful, but you can move it. But I still have problems. And the early boxes didn't have knobs on the outside. About 2 or 3 years after they started, I started actually designing knobs right into them. And in fact, I did one box which was called the box of knobs. It had a front that just opened, but the back had about 6 knobs in a row that they were like organ stops. You know, they pull out and in. They didn't move anything. They would just pull out or pull in. Which brings me to another facet of the boxes. People used to say, oh, you should motorize those or make them bigger, or, you know, so that they'll move and they'll do things. And so one of the students, must be 25 years ago anyway, one of the students at the University of Waterloo was making a movie. And we did a stop action so that we'd pose the box, and I would sneak up and open the door 1/8 of an inch, and then I'd go back and he'd click the shutter, and then I'd open a little more and he'd click the shutter. And then when you ran it through, the boxes would open and close. And in this particular bit, the knobs went in and out. And I would gradually turn the box around so that the thing would swirl and the knobs would be going. And it was sort of interesting. The only problem was that we didn't consult on the music, and he picked a piece from the Ferdi Groffet's Grand Canyon Suite, and it was the donkey bum 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 bum, and this thing was going in and out, and it was so funny that I said, oh no, we won't do that, and I've never done another one.